the contest in there today. All right. A lot of folks want to know, what are the judges looking for? All right. Right now they're looking at the models. They're deciding the first, second, and third place models in each of the categories. They're not looking for the largest or the most colorful. They're supposed to look at how they are built. We're going to get into that. The judges are not supposed to pick models up. So they're expected that however you display the model is how it's
We have a
going to be
3:30
viewed.
seminar starting. What judges are looking for, this is with John Tanay. You don't want to miss this one. Although, you still have the raffle ticket, good, don't toss them. Because we'll have one final raffle at 4:15, and then another one during the contest ceremony after that. So don't throw away your raffle
Throw them
ticket.
away.
Hold on,
In the
folks.
aircraft category, throw them away. Sorry.
The judges are not allowed to use magnifying glasses, but they do use flashlights. And at the Nationals, everybody has a flashlight, a little mini pin light, and they're looking in and up and under and around. So what are they looking for? And we're gonna go to that handout sheet here. The first thing they look for is the preparation of the model, okay? Did you remove the molding seams? Did you remove the ejector pin marks? Do you have any questions on what those are?
So, okay, like, I struggle with I guess, how to take them off.
On how to take the parts off?
How to take the injection, like the seam.
Okay.
And I heard somebody use like a Sharpie and you sand it until the Sharpie marker erases.
There, I'll tell you, I would have loved to do that, but this would be a 3-day seminar
Okay.
if we got into all the little tricks of the trade. Just basically what you want to do is look at the model. When the parts are cast, they're in the mold and they get pushed out of the mold with little fingers. Those are called ejector pins, and they leave marks on the model. And depending on how well the model was engineered, they may all be on the inside where nobody's ever going to see them, or they can be right in the middle of a fuselage or a wing, and you should fix those. Okay? You got one pretty good? Come on. Andrew, Matt, would you run one of these back to the gentleman that just got here? And you're welcome to have one too if you'd like. Sir. And you remove the burrs and the flash. So when the molds are pressed together, if it's a brand spanking new mold, you may not have any of the plastic ooze out between the mold halves. As the dies wear, stuff squishes out. And that's called flash. And you want to look for on the edges of all your parts, get rid of all the flash.
At 4 o'clock, we will be opening the contest doors. At 4 o'clock, we will be opening the contest doors.
Okay.
So wash your hands and get ready for our wonderful awards ceremony.
All right. Basic assembly they look at. And they're looking, and we've got a category in this show called basic building. And in that category, we don't allow any paint. You build the model as it is out of the box. You can put decals on, you can use clear coats, but no paint. So the judges are looking for how well you got your seams in there. If you used some kind of a filler, that's okay, but they're looking for how you dealt with all the seams and what they look like now without paint over the top of them. You want to fill in your sink marks. So in the mold, sometimes you have a thick area in a plastic part that as it cools, it sinks in. You want to fix your sink marks. You want to sand all your joint seams and gaps between poorly fitting parts. And I've gotten to the habit where in a lot of kits, they have a little hole and a little pin on the other part of the mold, and it's supposed to go right in there and fit perfectly. I cut all the pins off. I just set them and just finagle with them in my hands until they fit right. Align your parts. You want to look at them from the front, top, sides, back. while the glue is still setting, so you can maneuver stuff around if you have to. Sometimes you need, when you're doing all your test fitting, is to see if there's any parts that maybe you can reshape. Sometimes I use boiling water, dip the part in, when you bring it up, you can squeeze it apart a little bit, but again, there are hundreds of ways to do this, and everybody's gonna tell you what they do. Apply sparingly when you use glue, okay? There are tools out there to help you use glue. Eliminate your sanding scratches. Anytime you are trimming something and you got a knife cut in there, look for those kind of things. You want to fix those. Eliminate frosting on your canopy. I do not use super glue. I know we have other members of the club who use super glue all the time. I have a habit with super glue. As soon as I put it on, it gets a frost around everywhere that there's super glue. I don't deal with it. I use 2-part epoxy for just about everything. Avoid sanding round edges flat and flat edges round. And again, there's tools for that. You can make just a flat little sanding board, wet sand your parts down with that. They make a product called the Flexifile, which is a little strip in a U shape, and you cannot make a flat spot with it. So if you're trying to sand down a bomb or a nacelle or something that's round, there's tools to help you do that. But you want to watch that you're not sanding those rounds flat with a file or something, because that's something that gets looked at. Replace panel lines that you lost during sanding. So you may have, where you sanded a seam and they may have had raised panel lines, or when you puttied the seam, you put putty in the panel line, you want to go back in and rescribe those. Okay? Make sure all your wheels and tracks touch the ground. There are an awful lot of cars that get disqualified almost immediately because they get down and look at them and there's one wheel sitting up here. Now, if you have 3 wheels on an aircraft, you're probably in pretty good shape because they're all going to touch. Pretty much no matter what you can do about it, they're going to touch. Detailing. This is something that people really fall apart on. The amount of detailing you put on a kit is not judged. I'm going to say that. It's not judged until the very end of judging. If they get through and they find there's 6 kits that all look perfect, they can't find any flaws on them, then they're going to start looking at, okay, how much work did he put into this kit? How much extra stuff is there? Here's an example. I entered a car contest one time, and the judges there scored on points for each piece of detail that was there. And the one guy that scored the most points had things like a hat pin, 24 scale car. He had a women's hat pin was his oil dipstick. So in scale, you'd have to pull that thing out like this to check the tip of it and then put it back in. And he had wing nuts on top of his air cleaners, and you'd have to turn the wing nuts like this. But in that contest, this was not an IPMS event, he won because he had all these extra points of detail. None of them were in scale, but they were there, and it counted for him. So it's yeah.
You're, if I understand you correctly, let's say you have 2 models that are no flaws.
Yep.
But one has more added detail than the other. Is that like a tiebreaker? Or
It can be a tiebreaker because it's a matter of he may have added a bunch of detail, but he didn't do it well. Then
Well,
at that point,
I'm
it may,
assuming if it made it to the final
Yeah,
2,
then
and
he
they didn't
probably
find
would've
that
been-
I'm assuming that these 2 models are equally as well built.
Yep.
But
If there's
one
no
has
flaws
more.
on either one of them, it's probably going to go to the guy who did more work on it.
Okay.
Okay. And it's the same thing along the lines of accuracy. If you're building an aircraft and you've got all the plumbing and everything in there, as long as it was done well, you're going to score all right. If it gets down to you got two planes of the same kind, you may have a judge who gets in there and says, all right, that hose is supposed to be black, and he's got a green hose. That is at the very end of the judging, when it's just way past, does this look nice or does that look nice, okay? So they definitely get into the quality of the work. If you're going to spend the money, do the work. Learn how to solder photo etched, learn how to bend it right, learn how to attach it right, okay? And again, everything we're talking about here, there are so many YouTube videos out there, and every one of those guys is gonna say what he does to make it look right, okay? You wanna drill out your gun barrels, exhausts, any kind of stacks you have. Any kind of purchase details need to be neatly done. Now, some of the kits out there are just loaded with photo etch. I mean, you can buy a $500-600 kit with no problem. Those could still be built out of the box because all the parts came in the box, but you need to do a nice job on it. You gotta actually get it to fit right and in place. Painting and finishing, avoid thick paint. If you don't have an airbrush and you're looking to build for competition, I would suggest investing in an airbrush and a small compressor or even cans of gas, because you want to thin your paint. When I paint cars, I don't know if you were in the model room, I've got the little 43rd scale cars that are there, little guys. Each of those cars has about 8 coats of paint on it, but each coat barely covered the surface. I thin my paint to the consistency of skim milk. So once I thin it, I put it in the jar and I shake it, and I should just barely see paint left on the sides of the walls. That's how I do it. We have some other guys. We have a gentleman in the club who sprays at a pressure that I could never match
150 PSI.
and does a wonderful job. So it's all what you've learned how to do to get along into this program as to what you want to make it look good. Paint your hard to reach areas before you start assembling. On tanks, you want to spray up inside the fender skirts. You want to spray it because when they judge, they may not pick it up, but they are going to be able to look all around it. They use flashlights, and that's when I was judging in the nationals for the juniors. That's one of the first things you see is like, oh, this thing looks great, until you get here and you see up underneath they didn't do anything behind the road wheels. Gun barrel was never drilled out. You want to get in and look at your model. One thing I do is I take photographs of it. I take maybe 50 photographs from every different position, and then I'll just sit and look at the photographs to see if I'm done with something. Because you can pick it out of a photograph easier than if you're looking at the model. Okay? It's just a little
I
habit
found
of
the
mine.
same thing. I think I'm done with something, I take a picture of it, and I go, oh my God, you know?
Yeah.
And I go back and fix it.
Yep, that's what you gotta do. Avoid overspray. So, if you do spray an area and it needs to be masked, learn how to mask. There's there's hundreds of ways to do it, but you get the tape on so that nothing goes underneath it, so that you have the tape where you want it, so that while you're spraying, no extra paint's going past the tape. You may have to cover the whole thing up in order to do a little stripe down the side of something. But that's what you want to do, is avoid all your overspray. Avoid poor masking. That's one of the things, if you get overspray on it or it seeps underneath the tape, it can be fixed, but it's hard. It's something, if you can get a good seal underneath it. I know some folks use frog tape, and it seems to work very well. All visible parts, painted, everything. Every side, up, down, back, forward. If you can see it, it should be painted. Avoid obvious brush strokes. On some tiny little parts, yeah, you don't want to break out an airbrush to paint a little rod that's sticking up there. But when you paint it, try not to have too much paint on it. Practice to see that you get just enough paint on it so you get a finish without seeing the brush strokes in it. Metallics are hard to do that, because metallics want to follow where the brush bristles are as you're going through. Always have a smooth, consistent paint surface. The cars I build, I always start with sandpaper and I go up to about 2,000 grit before I ever even put primer on. Okay? And then everything is light coats of everything and you just build it up. I sand between each layer. And you know, I've been asked, how do you get the glossy, shiny finishes? And it's all surface preparation. Because if you sand it smooth, that helps. If you sand it and leave scratches and things in it, those scratches will carry through to your final. No matter how hard you try, even once you get done polishing, you are going to see a scratch in there. Maybe tiny, minute, but it's there. Decals, align them correctly. Again, there's numerous videos on how to apply decals. Micromark makes a system with their blue and their red. Solvaset has a system. Learn what works with the decals you're working with. And if you've got a kit where they give you an extra decal, like maybe it's just the name of the kit and the manufacturer's logo, if you can use that to test, do it. I end up taking those kind of things and clipping it into 4 parts and trying 4 different solutions just to see which one, because if you put a setting solution on there, they crinkle up, depending on the setting solution, and it's almost impossible to get them to smooth back out again. Okay. You want to avoid visible decal film, which means the decals, when they're printed, have got a clear film all around the outside edge of them. A lot of decals you can buy now are all printed on like a laser printer or inkjet printer, and you have to trim the decal out of the paper because it's not a separate piece. You actually have to go in and trim. But when you trim even the decals with the clear around each part, trim as close as you can to the decal itself. Because once you apply it, you're going to have this little step that shows up on the edge of the decal. Okay? I'm a fan of not putting terribly thick gloss coats on my cars, because if you look at race cars, it's all stickers. Nothing, they're not clear coated. Now, if it's a custom or a hot rod, the dragsters that they put these beautiful metal flake finishes and cover them with clear, that's a little different. But on most race cars, it's a sticker, and you can see the edge of the sticker. So I don't use a lot of clear. I do put something on them in order to keep them sealed on the body, but I'm not trying to eliminate the decal itself. Silvering. If you don't have a smooth surface, your decal is going to go on there and leave little pockets of air under the decal. And when you look at those, it just looks like it's a different color. Anything that's clear will show up as a white frost on the decal. And that's because your decal hasn't set down and gotten smooth on top of the surface. It sounds like a lot of work. It is, but it really isn't once you learn how to do it. And you know, I think what's really surprising is, well, for an example, testers just stopped producing their whole Model Master line. And the number of modelers who are just, you know, like, I don't know what to do. I've used testers for years. I know exactly what proportions to use. I know how each color is going to react. Now I got to find something new. You want to get into something like that with a pattern. You want to be able to go in and have a process that you know is going to work consistently. You want to improve your skills. You want to practice, and that's one thing like I did for, and I know other folks in the car building, you get sometimes 2 or 3 engine blocks in a kit. Use the engine blocks to practice gluing. Just something, you squeeze it together, you know, want to see what happens if I have like a clamp to it, and then the soft plastic squishes out the sides, or whatever. I just want to hold it until it's set, but just practice with things. Surely you've got pieces of plastic that just need to be put together somehow, and just practice and see what works best for you. There's all kinds of books out there. Kalmbach Publishing puts out a couple of books, Tips for Plastic Modeling and Building Plastic Models. The best way to improve is to go meet with other modelers, okay? We have a club here in town. We've been here since, what, 74? 73. It's always fun to see new people come to our club, and they kind of stand off to the side and kind of want to see what everybody's doing, and then somebody asks a question about, hey, how do you guys do this? And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I'd like to know that too.
Is this kind of club where you get patches and stuff? You have to like
Not
murder
really.
somebody?
No, you get a cool shirt if you pay for it.
Okay.
But yeah, we just meet, and it's just a group. We've got like most clubs have a build meeting where you just come together and build,
that is
and you can
dope.
walk around and
Yeah.
talk to people and say, you know, what are you building? How are you doing that? You know, what's the process that you've used to get that far? And most modelers will be very happy to sit and talk with you and tell you what they do. They'll help you. You get, that's where I think you learn the most, is you can get in there. Also, YouTube videos. There's just a ton of them out there. I always take them with a grain of salt. That this is not the right way to do it. This is how I do it. You know, maybe something that just you can't deal with. That's the purpose. You see the video, you think about it, you might try it. If it doesn't work, find something else. But you want to constantly be improving your skills to get better and better. And that's kind of what the judges are after. First of all, in the IPMS world, they look for fit and finish. Does it fit? Is everything there? What's it look like on the outside? If you don't pass those, you're not going to go very much farther. But if you get past, hey, that fits good, I don't see any seams, all the wheels are touching, now what's the finish look like? Okay, the finish is right. Some airplanes are not glossy, some are not flat. They may have a semi-gloss on them. We had a member in our club who was, he was an older gentleman who worked during the Korea War, and he says they wash the airplanes with kerosene. So they get new airplanes in, they'd be pretty and shiny, and after a few runs, they'd have this slosh of kerosene on the side of them, and the finish started cracking. And so it's just a matter of, you know, do some research, figure out what finish you're trying to match. Okay. Any questions with that? Anybody have any questions on? We got a little bit of time left that we can talk about what does get done. But again, I think the best place you're going to find that is either talking to other modelers in a meeting or looking at videos or books.
So I was really intrigued about the because I was thinking about painting. I'm not painting, but doing one without paint.
Yeah.
And you could enter that into a contest. So I guess you'd have to just sand any mold lines or anything like that. They just want to see how clean it looks.
Yep. You just assemble it to the best of your ability, and you just don't cover it up. I don't know. Were there any entered in us? None today? That's too bad. That's a category we've tried to push for years,
We've been pushing it for years.
and we're the only group that's ever brought it up. But
The Europeans are masters at it.
Really?
You'll see the Europeans, like the French nationalists and the Germans, they'll do a whole car in resin, tires, wheels, and everything, and they just leave it bare. And like they'll have an ATV, it's got 3 clear as hell resin tires on it, and 4 that are milky white.
Wow.
And that's a category.
Yeah.
It's a whole category, and the Europeans are just
well, you
beautiful at it.
You think about it when you're younger. When you were building your first kits, did you paint them?
I
Basically got the box and that
I didn't,
afternoon and
yeah.
went together, and you were
yeah,
done.
that's right.
Yeah.
My first kit. Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're after, but it's honing your skills to get everything to fit, to make it smooth.
I used to hand paint the bodies,
Yeah.
and then when I saw my dad spray paint, I was like, "What?" It just threw, you know. I was like,
I'm
this
going to
is-
throw a caveat out here that there are people, and you may be one of them, who don't care to compete. I want to build because I'm having fun. Great, then do that. Okay? If you are going to compete, then you want to follow some of these ideas on what you need to work on in order to get your models up to the competition level that's out there. All right? Anybody?
I got a question, I don't know if it
Sure.
really has anything to do with this, but it's something that you brought up. I just recently started building some race cars, I had never done that before.